Hello everyone, welcome back to Chemistry Chronicles. This is part 1 of our pre-calculus lessons, and today we will learn how to find the domain of a function. This is a function. Now we will try to find the domain of this function. So to find the domain of a function, we have to make sure that the denominator is not equal to 0. Any number that makes the denominator of this function 0 will not be included in the domain. Now, in order to know which number makes the denominator 0, we have to take the entire equation and solve it to get that number. In this case, our denominator is 3x plus 1. First, we will subtract 1 from both sides. Then we will divide both sides by 3. This will give us x is not equal to negative 1 over 3. That means our domain is all the numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity except negative 1 over 3, because this can make our denominator 0. To write the domain in interval notation, first we will put parentheses, then negative infinity to negative 1 over 3, parenthesis closed, union, parenthesis negative 1 over 3 to positive infinity, and parenthesis closed. Let's have a look at another example. In this case, the function does not have any variable in the denominator. That means no value or number can make the denominator 0. Therefore, the function does not have any restrictions. In this case, the domain will be all real numbers. If you want to write it in interval notation, we will write parentheses negative infinity to positive infinity, parenthesis closed. Or you can also write all real numbers. Let's have a look at the next one. In this case, there is a root in the denominator. So the value of x cannot be equal to 0. In fact, it is always greater than 0. Because we cannot have the root of negative values. The root of a negative value is always undefined. Therefore, we have to make sure that our denominator, if it has a root, is always greater than 0. Now, if we take square on both sides, we get 2 minus x is greater than 0, because on the left side the root and the square cancel each other, and on the right side 0 square is 0. After subtracting 2 on both sides, we get negative x is greater than negative 2. Then we divide both sides by negative 1. At the end we get x is smaller than 2. It is because when we divide or multiply by a negative number, the sign gets flipped. So in this case, our domain would be parentheses negative infinity to 2, parenthesis closed. Adding a parenthesis means that the number is not included. In this example, x square plus 4 is our denominator. So we have to put x square plus 4 is not equal to 0 to find the value of x. Subtracting 4 from both sides, we get x square is not equal to negative 4. Note that if you have a power 2 or the multiples of 2 in the power, then the denominator can never be 0. That means if the power of x is 2 or its multiples, the denominator cannot be 0 irrespective of what the value of x is. Even if we plug a negative number, it will still give us a positive answer. In this case, domain will be all real numbers, or negative infinity to positive infinity. This one is a bit tricky. In this case, we will have two restrictions. First, we will take everything that is inside the root, and this will be greater than 0, because we already discussed that if we have a root in the denominator, it cannot be equal to 0. It will only be greater than 0. Our next step is to get rid of the root. So we will square on both sides, which will give us x minus 3 is greater than 0. Now we add 3 on both sides and find out that x will be greater than 3. Next step is to take the whole thing in the denominator, and this will be greater than 0. So root of x minus 3 plus 1 is greater than 0. Now we will solve for x. Subtracting 1 on both sides, we get root of x minus 3 is greater than negative 1. Now to get rid of the root, we will square both sides. By doing so, we get x minus 3 is greater than 1. Now the last step is to add 3 on both sides to get the value of x. So the value of x is greater than 4. In this case, we have two restrictions. So our domain will be parentheses negative infinity to 3 parenthesis closed union parenthesis 3 to 4 parenthesis closed union parenthesis 4 to positive infinity. That means in this case the domain does not include 3 and 4. This is our last problem for today. In this case we don't have a denominator, so the denominator is 1. However, we have a root in the numerator, so we also have to take that into consideration. If we have a root in the numerator, we can put everything that is inside the root greater or equal to 0. In this case, our x can also be equal to 0 because the root is in the numerator. By subtracting 3 on both sides, we get x is greater or equal to negative 3. That's all. This was an easy one. So our domain in this case will be bracket negative 3 to positive infinity parentheses. Because x is greater than or equal to negative 3, we have to put a bracket before negative 3, which means negative 3 is also included.